Well, we've finally got the result of the US midterms. The Senate, of course, as we knew pretty early on, was being retained in terms of control by the Democrats. The Republicans have just gained control of the House. It's a squeaker, though. What's it actually going to mean? Joining me live is US political expert Professor Simon Jackman with the University of Sydney. Thanks very much for your time. I guess one of the really interesting things about control of the House is, does it mean gridlock? And even, what is this control? Because there are enough within this control for the Republicans to have it, but do they rely on a few votes from so-called colourful representatives that might not be locked in?
Absolutely, Tom. The slim Republican majority will pose an immense political management challenge to whoever becomes the Speaker of the House, and presumably a Republican. But there's some doubt as to whether Kevin McCarthy will win a vote for the speakership, or whether the powerful caucus on the Freedom Caucus will flex their muscle and want to see a speaker that's a little closer to them. So that's going to pose an immense challenge, Tom. That slim majority means you have no votes to lose. And with a caucus as unruly and as heterogeneous, perhaps a more polite way of saying it, as the Republican caucus will be, it's going to be very, very tricky for whoever gets it. And bear in mind, Tom, Paul Ryan couldn't get it done. John Boehner couldn't get it done. It has been a little bit of a poison chalice to become Speaker of the House when you've got such a diverse and energised, and in some cases quite mad as hell, some elements of the Republican caucus. So watch this space.
Yeah, so look, the appointments that you mentioned there, well, you mentioned one of them, there are others to make as well. If we do see a few of the so-called mad as hell people appointed, does it mean anything for Australia in particular? Is this the hint of the direction of the Republican Party? Does it affect the mechanics of government? What are we actually talking about in terms of consequences?
Yeah, right. So direct interest for Australia. Let's hit on that. There are a couple of House committees with real consequences, and that is Armed Services and Ways and Means. Armed Services, because that's where so much congressional oversight of defence posture and, critically, defence expenditure runs through that committee. The ranking Republican member right now, Mike Rogers, is a pretty sensible, safe pair of hands on defence policy, and for him to be elevated to chairman of that committee when Republicans take majority control of the chamber in early January of next year, that wouldn't be a bad thing from Australia's interests. The other name, one of the co-chairs of the Friends of Australia caucus, is Mike Gallagher. I think Australian Washington watchers will be keeping a very close eye on where Mike Gallagher lands in terms of leadership roles. Both Rogers and Gallagher and Senator Marco Rubio, you put them among three of the most vocal voices in the US Congress on either side of the aisle with respect to Indo-Pacific strategy, countering China's rise, and really into the nuts and bolts of defence posture coming out of Honolulu, Okinawa, Guam, what platforms are being deployed where. Australia would very much welcome seeing in the House either Rogers and or Gallagher take on leadership roles in the new configuration.
Okay, all right, there's some positions to watch. What about in a policy sense on Ukraine? Because one of the pieces of pre-analysis, if you want to call it that, because assuming the red wave was going to happen, was, well, this is the moment for Joe Biden, that it's too difficult to keep up a big, costly contribution to what's happening in Ukraine, helping to ward off the invasion from Russia. Is that talk evaporated now? Is this path going to continue? And any, close eye from China even on how this resistance goes? Well, it's going to be the US still backing Ukraine in all the way?
Yeah, look, I tend to think on balance that will. There's a few voices in the Republican caucus who are saying not another dime on Ukraine. We've got priorities at home to attend to. I don't see those voices being able to get a line item through the defence budget somehow constraining the executive. It would have to get through the House in the first place, and I think there's enough Republican votes plus Dems. Then you got the Senate, and then you got Biden's veto pen as well. It's tough to see. I think those voices will get a lot more oxygen now, but at the end of the day, it's hard for me to see US policy with respect to Ukraine changing in the short term. There will be a hell of a fight about it, I suspect, and perhaps that's unwelcome in and of itself, but I think the policy settings and the flow of weaponry, intelligence, support will continue, as will the shot in the arm it gives to the NATO alliance more broadly.
All right, let's turn to Donald Trump. Simple, rapid questions to throw at you.
Sure.
Does he win the nomination?
Okay,
does he only run? Does DeSantis run? And does DeSantis need, as few other competitors in the race as possible to be any chance, because it'll be Trump versus the rest, basically?
I think the best scenario, I think Trump runs. I think right now he is still the putative front runner. That may change as enough people start to yank their support from him. Keep an eye on the big money donors, some of whom have already yanked it. Best scenario for DeSantis is that it's a pretty clear contest. I think you don't want the anti-Trump voices to be split eight ways. I think if they coalesce behind, we've got a candidate, it's DeSantis or whoever it is. That's the best scenario for the non-Trump elements of the party can get behind a candidate, fund him or her, and get going.
Because remember, that's how it's going to work, right? They go state by state. If there's a huge field at the start, every state Donald Trump takes, it gets harder and harder. So that contest almost needs to be quite narrow from very early on, rather than the tradition of one by one, they slowly drop out. That's how Donald Trump won last time.
That's right, Tom. And then the party leadership, they do have a card to play here, and that's the rules they write for delegate allocation. Is it winner take all? No matter, even if you get 30% of the vote, you're the single biggest vote getter in a state's primary. You get all the delegates. Is it that, or is it proportional allocation? There are some games to play there, and they're always like generals trying to win the last war. You write the rules that would have helped Mitt Romney beat and win the primary. Let's see what rules. That's the one card the leadership has to play as to how they can help the anti-Trump forces, frankly, get the nomination.
That's a very interesting point and a good one to make. It's a fascinating run. It doesn't feel the same as last time, given the donor big watch and even his own daughter saying, "I'll support you from afar."
Amazing.
But we'll talk about that another day. Simon Jackman, thank you.
Okay. Good on you, Tom. Thank you.